Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another TLC conversation. Today, we're going to be talking about asking better questions. But first, reminder, YouTube channel, there's links in the TLC Slack, or if you guys want to actually just type it in, I tried to make it as easy as possible for remembering. All of our conversations are loaded there. All the historical ones and today's conversation will also be added. Subscribe, share, whatever. It's pretty awesome content. Also, we're going to have our next TLC happy hour after a live panel conversation at the Digital Analytics Hub on October 10th. So if you're planning to come to the Digital Analytics Hub, sign up for that workshop and you get a free happy hour. If you're not planning to attend, why not? You need to go to the Digital Analytics Hub, go sign up. It's an awesome event. Lots of great content and a conversation-only format. So great conference. Happy to answer any questions anybody has about it. And I may even have a discount link if you're interested. So reach out. If you have topic suggestions for future panel conversations, you can send them to me through the Zoom chat, TLC Slack, send me an email, wherever. Always looking for new conversations. All right, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Els and Justine. Thank you guys for being here. I know I love that picture. It's like probably my favorite. Els is the co-founder of AG Consult, which is a Belgium-based usability and conversion optimization company. She's been doing this for a while, since 2001, making websites better using user research. She's a qualitative user research and moderated interview advocate, which I find very interesting, the moderated piece, which I imagine we're going to dive in a little bit deeper here, talking about how we can get some better answers. And she's moderated over 3,500 user tests for companies, including those you see listed there. So thank you, Els, for joining us. One added note, I got to meet Els at the CXL conference where she gave an amazing talk about this very topic, and it's the reason that we've invited her here, because I'm really excited to have her share with all of us. Second up is Justine. She is the senior UX researcher at Answer Lab, so needless to say, she does a lot of survey research. She also specializes in qualitative research methods, including the in-depth interview, ethnography, prototype testing, usability, focus groups, and we even talked about, some follow me home type stuff. She's been doing this for more than 10 years as a moderator, both for business to business and business to customer, B2C. I think that's how that is, industries, and she has a special focus in technology and manufacturing. So welcome, Justine, welcome, Els. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. Just to kick things off, I wanted, Els, if you wouldn't mind, take a second to talk to us a little bit about the difference between quantitative and qualitative data and research. After you take yourself off mute. There you go.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think that's a great start. First of all, I think you all can raise your hand in Zoom. So I'm going to ask a few questions, and I would like for all of you to raise your hand if you know the answer. So,
and the way they raise their hand, really quick, everybody go to the participants window, right? And it's at the bottom of the participant window. There's a yes, a no, and then raise your hand or thumbs up, thumbs down. Yep.
Yeah. So start off with a simple one. Who here knows the difference between quantitative and qualitative research? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, I see a number of hands. Showing up. I see pretty much all hands raised. Okay. If you don't worry. We'll get to that in a minute. So who here has a preference for quantitative research data over qualitative research data? Raise your hands. Hands raised. I see you, Tim. I see that hand raised. I'll come back to you. Now, again, raise your hand. Why do you prefer quantitative over qualitative?
Raise your hand if you're willing to answer the question.
Yeah. So I can see you're all pretty quiet there, as I had expected.
Come on, Tim.
So anybody up for answering that question? Why? I'll give you a chance to, you can unmute yourself if you want to answer the question. Go on. You know you want to. But I can see the sling is holding Tim back. Somebody else is going to have to step
Ben's
up.
going to do it. All right. Go, Ben. Take yourself off mute and tell us why you like quant.
I bit there. So, yeah, and I define quant. It doesn't always mean behavior, right? So
Hold on, Ben.
I'm sorry, Ben. I'm going to have to mute you there for a second and ask you to answer in numbers only, please. That was mean of me. I'm sorry. Yeah, I suckered you into a reenactment of this cartoon.
And if I may, Corey was right. He put in the Slack, it's a trap.
It is a trap. Yeah, Kelly couldn't resist. Really wanted me to sucker one of you guys into this. Yeah, I think this really sort of illustrates the difference between quantitative and qualitative research and shows the value of both. We need the quantitative research to know how many, and we need the qualitative research to know why. So we're not fighting each other, we're augmenting each other. And I'm myself, I'm not a big fan of there's always this discussion, quant versus qual. It's not quant versus qual, it's quant and qual. We need to work together, and that's how we get the best results. But thank you for playing along.
Really appreciate it, Ben. Sorry.
I'm a sucker.
If I see you in real life, I'll buy you a drink of your choice.
Awesome. All right. So let's take it to the next level. Let's talk about the most important things that you need to remember when designing a survey. And Justine, since you haven't had a chance yet to speak up, would you like to start? And note, folks on the call, if you're in the TLC Slack channel, Corey already started a couple of rules. So I'd love to see other people's thoughts and ideas on that so that Els and Justine can respond to it. But Justine, what are some of the things to remember when designing a survey?
Well, I would say one of the main things is to remember to ask your questions correctly. That's a big one. Especially in terms of avoiding things like asking, let's say, for example, a double-barreled question, which is one that has two topics, but is really only meant to give you one answer. So an example of that would be, when you're doing an in-depth interview and you're taking someone through some tasks in a particular, maybe on an app or something. And so instead of, in some cases, you may hear a question like, and I've heard this myself before, was this feature interesting and useful to you? And those are actually two different things. So
it's interesting but not useful, or useful but not interesting.
Correct. And things of that nature where you're really asking two separate questions. So it's important to remember to break those out and make sure you're sticking to one topic per question. So I think that would be one thing to think about. Another thing that I would recommend is to make sure you're not asking leading questions. So, and this can happen, I think, sometimes, especially in in-depth interviews where you see a participant struggling with a task, sometimes in usability. And I think sometimes by nature we want to say, oh, I see you're having an issue there. What's going on? What happened? And that really is a leading question. And a better approach would be to ask them, was it easy or difficult? What was easy or difficult about completing this task? That's a better way to get at that versus assuming that they're actually having difficulty.
That makes sense. What would you add, Els?
Well, I think, yeah, definitely. Double-barreled questions, leading questions, all things you shouldn't do in surveys. I think one of the first questions you should probably be asking as well is, what am I trying to find out? And is a survey really the best way to go? Because very often people come to me and ask for a specific type of research that they want doing. They'll say, we want to do user testing, or we want to do a survey. And then, so, okay, what do you want to find out? Tell me what they want to find out. And actually, their weapon of choice is not the right one. So first and foremost, some things just aren't meant to be surveys. If it's about behavior that you can observe on a website, like Justine said, if you can, then you need to do user testing. You can't ask people whether the checkout was easy. Well, you can ask that, but that doesn't really make a lot of sense, because one, your analytics will tell you that, because you'll see whether people drop off in steps. And that is something, if that is a sort of like a procedure, that a flow that people have to go through, you need to observe behavior, and you shouldn't ask questions about things where you can actually observe behavior when you have quantitative data from analytics and you have qualitative data from user session recordings or user tests to tell you that. So I would say surveys are great if you want to like probe for preferences, or for example, if you want to know why people, whether people have found the information that they're looking for on a particular page, then like a little pop-up web survey can be the way to go. But first and foremost, you have to think, what is my research question? Is a survey the best way to go about this?
What about the understanding task completion rate? That's one of the most effective ways that I've seen, like just simple, what were you trying to do today? Were you able to accomplish it? And then using that, not for qualitative data, it's almost like you're using it for quantitative data to get a metric. Is that an effective use of surveys, or are you missing out on a lot of information there?
I'll jump in now, and Justine, you add to my stuff, because yes, exactly, Kelly, this is what we do very often as a sort of, depends on the site, but as a sort of exit intent survey. When people are about to leave the website, you ask them, were you able to find everything that we were looking for? And indeed, could you do what you plan to do on our website today, yes or no? And if they say no, you can ask, what was it? And what did you find difficult? That often it can complement your analytics, because you will see that indeed people maybe spend a very long time on that page, but they're not doing what you really want them to do. And then you can get more information through the survey. I would always ask an open question as well. So not just, were you able to do the task that you came for, yes or no? But if you probe deeper and then ask, what was it that was so hard? And can you say why it was so hard? You can immediately, not just, that tells you not just what's wrong, but it gives you input on how to fix things. I don't know if that's something that you found as well, Justine?
Yes, I would definitely agree with that. And I kind of wanted to segue a little bit, if you guys don't mind, into probing questions. So something just kind of popped into my head sort of along with that. And so I know earlier someone had commented in the channel about probing, and definitely we don't want to over probe and tax out our participants and make them crazy. But I do think, to that point, there's a lot of value in good probing and effective probing. And one of the things that I think is important is to understand, when someone, when you're probing someone on a specific area, getting an understanding of if something they say is positive or negative. Because sometimes someone will react and say something, and you may assume in your mind, oh yeah, that's probably a negative thing. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes for them, it's actually a positive. So those are situations where it may seem obvious, but it's not obvious. There could be something underlying that. So I think it's important to make sure that we don't make assumptions about things that there could be a couple of different views about.
So, having participated in and helped develop a few surveys in my time, I know that the response rate is pretty strongly correlated to the number of questions, and adding in required open-end questions also has a dramatic effect. How would you guys respond to that? What would you do to ensure that you have some of that data without reducing your response rate significantly.
Can you actually rephrase that a little bit, Kelly? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Sure. When you add more than 2 or 3 questions to at least an exit survey or a pop-up survey, the response rate goes way down. And it goes down even further when you add open-ended questions, when those questions are required. Do you guys recommend making them required? Do you recommend a certain number of questions?
I think
that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think you really need to make the best use of that time because you know it's so limited and you know you're going to lose people. So I would say, and often I find myself doing with my clients, asking them to prioritize. What do you really need to know here? What's most important? What's a must have and what's a nice to have? And I think that's really the distinction there, because knowing that that's a possibility, you want to really get as much as you can at that point when you still kind of have them hooked in and engaged.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's true, and especially on exit intent, response rates can be dramatically low. Like we see, it also very much depends on the relationship between the user and the website we find. Like we've done research on nonprofit websites where we feel that there's, and you see this correlated in the response rates, there's the willingness to answer this website's questions is just a lot higher than, for example, in the B2B box industry, where I've also done exit surveys. Not so much there. So when you're looking at response rates of 1 to 2% on one of those exit surveys that pop up, yeah, that's not a lot. And while I agree that open-ended does require more effort from the user, my argument would be that it's worth it because you do get more input. And yeah, and so definitely if you have a big website, 1 to 2%, because the thing is with these surveys, we're not looking for thousands of answers, actually. You have to treat it like qualitative input. So I've had great insights from surveys where we've had 50 answers because basically the majority of them were about the same thing. They complained about the same thing. That's important. Do I care that it's only a few people? Actually, I don't. I think there's a very funny saying in usability. Yeah, sure. Your prototype is unusable, but how statistically significantly unusable is it? I mean, these people don't even know that there's not a how in statistically significant, but still, yeah, that's not the problem. Sometimes a low volume of answers, a very low volume of input from your user community can actually point you in a direction that will make quite a big impact. And it's better to ask fewer questions in surveys and to just do one survey for 2 weeks, run the other questions you want answered the next 2 weeks. So instead of trying to bundle it all together in one big survey, because usually those things don't correlate anyway. So the better thing is to do a short survey and then run it for however many number of weeks that you need, and then do another survey where you ask different things and where you learn different things again. So I think thinking about the correlation of your question, that's also an important thing to do. Do I really need to ask all these questions together at the same time from the same person?
Okay, so I want to go into other areas of qualitative research, but I have 2 remaining questions on surveys. And the first is about survey fatigue. So in the description that you just gave, Els, you're talking about, you're going to ask a couple of questions for 2 weeks, and you're going to ask a couple of other questions. Do you guys think it's important to set things up so that somebody who qualified for a survey doesn't get a second survey? Or conversely, do you want to keep hitting those people because they're willing to respond to surveys?
Justine, I'll let you do the talking on this one if you want to.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, because obviously, you want people that are engaged, and you know that obviously they had an interest and they've participated before. But yes, at the same time, you don't want to overtax people. So I feel like it really, that's a tough call to make. I think you just need to, overall, I would say you just really need to be very efficient with the questions you ask. And I probably will go back to this again and again because it's something I see a lot. And I can say in even a broader sense, a lot of times what I'll say to clients when we're putting together a survey and there's all these things they want to ask, and to Elle's point, about trying to put too many things into one survey. And I'll say to them, okay, are you looking for a signal or are you looking for depth here? Because if you just want to get a very kind of top level signal on something, then we can add, more questions, but you're not going to get the depth that you want. So that's another thing to consider too, is how deep you want to go. And that, allowing time for that is certainly important. I also think the nature of the questions helps in terms of fatigue. I think if you can structure them in a way that it keeps people more engaged, that's another great way too. I think you can be creative with your questions as well, so that they're more interesting and more engaging.
Okay, my second question, and then two folks have asked a third question that's the same. So my second question is around bias. Obviously, there is bias inherent in the people who are willing to answer a survey. They tend to either be very promoter, somebody who has a really close relationship with the brand, and or they just like to, give praise, versus somebody who's really unhappy. And everybody else that falls in the middle, who might be the most important part of your audience or not. No, without doing the analysis, you don't know. But if you're only getting the very happy and the very sad, what kinds of things do you guys do to mitigate that? Or is it even a concern?
Elle, do you have the thought on this one?
Well, you go first.
Okay, I was going to say, it depends on, I would say, the nature of the survey. If it's something where, in the recruitment process, where you want to always consider things like their attitude towards a particular brand when you're recruiting, if that's important, when you're screening people. So if there's a situation where that's a possibility, if it's not something where you just get people coming into a website and that's a different story. But if you have a situation where you have a more controlled situation where you're recruiting people for a particular study, one of the things you can do up front is actually ask people about, and mix it up, ask about different brands, competitors, and ask them, about their feelings towards a particular brand, so that if that's a concern, you can get a mix. That being said, a lot of times, you don't want to get, especially for a particular client, you don't want to get people that are super, like the really super negative people towards a brand. So you want to be careful of that too. So I would say in the upfront part, you can do something in terms of kind of helping mitigate some of that.
Structuring the prompt, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree there. It's very important to always keep in mind who you're surveying. Also, it's the question in itself is a little bit biased because why would you assume it's only those people who want to answer?
Because that's the only time I respond.
I hear it.
But you're right. It's very biased.
I get that question a lot as well. And it's very funny because we have a certain survey that we run to find out who visits the website and what they want to do on the website. People always say, oh, that's what you have Google Analytics for, or that's what you have Web Analytics for. And I just say, no, Web Analytics tells you what people actually do. It doesn't tell you what they want to do. However, when we do our top task survey, where we basically ask people, who are you and what is the purpose of your visit to this website, we see a huge correlation with the top pages in analytics. only if the website is well structured. Sometimes we see answers in the
And when
search.
there's a gap, that's a whole opportunity right there, right?
I know, and that's so exciting because sometimes people come to a website to do something that they expect this company to do, and they don't actually do that, which is really, and analytics would never tell you that. You don't have a page on this particular product that apparently people expect from you. We did it for a certain insurance company, and people came for travel insurance. This company did not have travel insurance, but the people who thought that they did were, we had also asked, are you a client of this company, yes or no? And so they were like, this is my trusted insurance company. I'm now looking for travel insurance. I will come here. I'm not saying that, they have to offer this all of a sudden, but it's interesting to know these things, and only qualitative research can tell you that. Only open-ended questions will be able to tell you that. So I don't know how I got here from, are the right people answering the questions, but yeah, there you go.
I like it. So let's ask the question that we have over in the Slack about Likert scales. So Tim starts the question with, is the Likert style question a quantitative or qualitative? And Mike asks, what are the pitfalls of using a Likert scale?
Yeah. And is it a 5 or a 7-point Likert?
Right.
I'm either way, I'm not the biggest fan
of Likert scales or scale questions.
No.
I don't like using them in qualitative studies at all.
No, because, what does it mean? What are you learning? What are you going to do with that?
It's really about getting a score, isn't it?
And what are you going to do with that score?
Yeah.
Put it in a presentation? Just, I'm with you there, Justine. In qualitative, it's just, meh.
And you run the risk there. I see a danger in doing that because you want to remember that, with qualitative, you are it's directional, it's exploratory, you're dealing with a small sample of people. And what I found is when you start putting scales into, and there are folks that ask you to do that sometimes, there is the danger of the interpretation on the back end where people want to hang their hat on a number, or they say, oh, okay, well, can you tell us give us the average of what people said on that scale? And you shouldn't be using the numbers that way because it's really just directional. So, I personally try to discourage people from doing that in a qualitative study.
So that's really interesting. I hadn't heard that argument yet, but it makes a ton of sense. If, those of us in the more quantitative space, we are looking for numbers and metrics that we can use in dashboards to show trends, but we have much higher quantity when we come up with those metrics. A survey by definition is much smaller. Qualitative research is much smaller. So if we can fuse the two and put a number and create a metric based on those responses, by its very definition, it should only be directional. Yet we don't report, or shouldn't report, directional metrics in the quantitative space. Why are we willing to do it in the qualitative? And that can probably really cause some interesting confusion.
Yeah.
Well, let's step out of survey. It was a good place to get us started because I think everybody has experience with and familiarity with. But when we chatted before this, you both had some really interesting examples of other ways that you get information from your customers with much deeper insights. And I wanted to ask each of you, so you get a chance to think about it, your favorite method and why for getting qualitative research, qualitative responses from really good questions that you might ask for the customers, and how do you do it, and why is it your favorite?
I can actually answer that one. I have a couple. I am always a fan of in-depth interviews. What I love about those is the ability to really go deep with folks. And especially, when you're dealing with sensitive topics, that's the way to go. You don't want to do that in a group setting. Obviously, focus groups, there's some good things about those. If it's really broad and exploratory, that could be useful for generating ideas. If you want a discussion that kind of brings out issues that maybe you hadn't thought of around the product or service. That's a great use for focus groups. But IDI is really, when you're really looking to go deep with someone and really get a clear understanding without that group influence, specifically, how they feel about a particular product or service or experience. I love that method, and I feel like you can really get a lot of great information that way. Another thing that I love is I love diary studies. And the reason I love those, I know I talked to you guys a little bit about this before, is that basically it allows you to have the participant self-report their activities over, say, like the course of a week. So they're tracking and recording their habits and behaviors really around anything. It could be a product, it could be dealing with a service, it could just be regular, how they live in their life. Maybe you're looking to explore, figure out needs that they might have around something. So the nice thing about it is you get that in the moment data that they are, and if you give them like a daily tracking tool, they can take pictures, they can upload videos, they can write and describe things to you. And it's not only great for getting in the moment information, but it's very engaging. And especially in the way today people are on social media and they like to show things and they like to kind of express themselves, you give them this opportunity to express themselves and share information in a way that they're comfortable with. And I think you get a lot of great feedback that way. The other thing that I love about this approach is that it really, rather than on the back end saying, so what was your experience with this? And asking people, to remember. I mean, I don't even remember what I had for breakfast this morning, so it's like or did I eat breakfast? Right. When you have this methodology that allows you or allows them to capture the blow by blow, what they're doing, and those really, detailed things that they may not remember or may not seem like a significant thing, but when you look at it all together and you start to see these patterns, with the step-by-step process, you can really uncover some great insights. So I'm a huge fan of diary approach. So that's me. How about you, Els?
I completely agree on the going in depth. So depending on what you want to find out, you can do interviews or indeed, the diary studies. And I love how you describe that, Justine, because it's documenting of behavior. It's not giving opinions. It's documenting of behavior. When we do interviews, it's because we want to not document behavior, but really, probe deeper into people's reasonings, into people's thought processes, into people's decision-making criteria what are they thinking when, for example, somebody who opens an online shop and they're looking for a payment provider, what's important to them? And especially if it's your first time that you're doing an e-commerce, what do you already know and what do you don't know? Because very often, vendors present products in a way where basically they just push characteristics at people, but you don't know what's important. You have no idea. You have other things that you do know, and you need guidance in a certain way. And we often find it's very interesting to also talk with the sales reps of that company to sort of do internal in-depth interviews. So
it's a good point.
Something to a noob. What are your questions? Because usually they have like the questions in an order in which they ask them, because that sort of creates a wizard. And that's what we try to do with people as well. Does this correlate? Does what the sales team say correlate with what the actual users or the potential buyers of this product say? So in-depth interviews, great. And user testing. If you want to see people, if you want to know why there's a certain drop off on a certain step of your page, or why people aren't doing something that you want on a particular page type, I'm still a very big fan of moderated user testing, provided you do the moderation right. And this is the tricky bit, because setting up a survey or doing interviews as well, it is extremely easy to bias your question, or to behave in such a way that you bias your participant. If I'm sitting there going like, that's not good. You have to, your face, it can bias.
That's poker.
Oh man, yeah. You have to really neutral as you can. We teach user testing moderation skills as well. And sometimes what people do is they ask the question and they basically start looking at the part of the screen where they expect the test participant to click. And we're like, no. Have you ever seen the horse who can count? That's exactly that. They're gonna, if you're gonna give them that much body language, then that's what they'll do. So, and people think that's easy. People think because it's not big numbers and tools and statistical significance and p-values that it's easy because it's just words. Not easy.
Can I add something to that? You just made me think of something that was such a great. I love the way you described that, Els, and you made me think of something that I think is really important in this process, and that is when you set up the scenario of this usability exercise or this experience, whatever it may be, right? The idea being to take the time in the beginning to really get the participant comfortable and let them know. This isn't a test, because it really isn't. There's no right or wrong answers. Nothing you say is, you're not going to fail.
Sure.
And I always say that. And I think that kind of tends to take care of some of that uncomfortable feeling in the time when they're not clicking on what you want them to click on, because I think sometimes then they start to look to you and, you're in that kind of weird zone. So I think if they know ahead of time and feel confident that no matter what they do, it's not the wrong thing, I think that relaxes that a little bit and allows them to behave naturally. And I'll even say to them, I want you to do what you would normally do. Like, go ahead and pretend I'm not here, pretend you're home. What would you do next? And I think as moderators, we can really set the stage for that and help them feel comfortable in the experience. So there aren't those odd moments, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah. That's so important, that the making sure that this person that you've invited, that they're comfortable. I've seen people do it where they come in and they go, yes, so the first task I have for you is, and I'm like, no, it's like, ugh. You have to find something out about this person, because the more you know about this person beforehand, the more you can also ask questions that you're sure that they can relate to. You can I try to keep my scenario questions quite open. And then when I know, this person has kids, I could actually ask this question in such a way that it might relate to their. Now I know that you have a 16-year-old son, Kelly, who's just had a birthday. I might smuggle that into a question if it's relevant. So you're really engaged and you're really like motivated to do that real thing. Making sure your test participant is comfortable is super important. And that also, so many things are in play here. How close do you sit to them? Because I've been a phony test participant in the user testing courses, and some people just sit too damn close.
Isn't that culturally different?
It might be, and that's why I say if you want to do user testing somewhere like in China or Iran, don't ask me, because I have no idea what the cultural norms are. I would say Europe, yes. US, America's okay, but anywhere else, I don't know. And so I would indeed not be the best person to do that. Also, your language is very important. Ideally, you have native speakers, or at the very least near native speakers. Oh my God, no! I would never do a user test in French, for example. I speak a little bit. I'm just not fluent enough in French to do a user test in French. I can't. So no, there's a lot of things that play into making your test participant feel comfortable, that are important to get indeed that natural behavior that you're looking for, and also to basically yeah, make your scenario, make your questions as real as possible. And so when it's, for example, in a commercial environment, to also give them money to spend. And I tell you, when you tell your test participant, we're on this department store website, and you get your fee for participating, but here's a voucher for €50.
Go buy stuff.
I know, yeah, buy stuff. Then all of a sudden, because if you don't do that and they're like, oh yeah, I'm looking, so it's summer and I'm looking for sandals, is that what you're saying? Click, click, click. Yeah, they have my size, I'll buy these. If they're spending their own money, oh my God, they want to see, they want to see the bottom of the sole of that sandal all of a sudden. They will click on the fabric picture of a dress to see exactly what it looks like. And you would never know that people want to do that when they're not spending their own money. And also it sort of very often naturally segues into, because sometimes you have to sort of say, okay, we're nearing the end, so please buy something here. Suppose you bought the wrong thing. Could you return it? What's the return policy? And then people just immediately, well, very often they even go and do it themselves because they're invested and it's a real experience. It's a real thing that they're doing. So the closest you can get to that, the better.
I never would have even thought of that. That's a great idea if you could make it happen. Yeah.
You can give me money to spend, Els. I'll do it.
Hero, I got this.
Yeah.
Okay, so you both shared your favorites. Now, there were things not mentioned, which I assume go on the opposite end of the spectrum of what you prefer in qualitative research. Two that jumped out at me were unmoderated user studies and focus groups.
Well, I think Justine briefly mentioned focus groups as a great way to do ideation, and I agree with that. Focus groups are great for ideation, full stop, let's move on.
So what aren't they good with and why?
They're not good if you want, people going to be, we want to know whether people can easily find their way on our website. Can we do a focus group? No. Well, actually, no, I won't do a focus group if you want to know if people can find their way on your website. There's other ways to find this out. Again, you have your analytics where you can follow your user path. You can watch your user session recordings, which are also. I'm not averse to user session recordings. I actually quite like user session recordings because you get a lot of them, and you can watch them at double, triple speed, and sometimes you have to because otherwise you'd be bored out of your brains. But it can really give you in a quick way and a cheap way to sort of see, because sometimes user behavior, they don't have to say anything. When you see a mouse go on a, I remember this very clearly. There was one client that we had, and it was Visit Ostend. Visit Ostend. Ostend is a Belgian city by the sea. And they had a page called Parkings. And we saw people on this page, you scroll down and then go like, oh, the word free parking. see the mouse go to free parking. And then it went everywhere. It went up again, it went down again, it went up again, it went down again, free parking. And they tried to click on the address. And like, tried to click on the address again of the parking. We're like, what's missing? Anybody in the audience know? Again, audience participation, people. Parking page full of text, free parking addresses. What were these people looking for? Go, Callie.
Maps?
Yeah, of course they're looking for a map. You don't have to, to be honest, I don't have to do very much in-depth user research to know that. That is just common sense. But this, when you see that those pointers are crystal clear. And I love what Erica Hall says. You have to do just enough research just in time. You don't have to waste user testing to fix that problem. Let's do an A/B. Let's put a map there. Let's A/B test that, and we're done. I wouldn't even A/B test it, to be honest, but there you go. There is such a... if you have all the volume.
You shouldn't test broken shit. I totally agree with that. If you've got a broken experience, just go fix it.
Exactly. So
Exactly.
yeah, that stuff. I've recently been converted to unmoderated testing, but not for user. I know this is so great, but actually not really for usability or UX purposes, but for copy purposes. Because when people talk, the stuff they say, because that's what happens in unmoderated, they do a lot of talking. And very often you also get sort of people who semi do this for a living.
Mm-hmm.
They'll use words like, oh, this font size is a little, font size. My mother does not know what font size is. She just says, these letters are too small. I can't read them. That is a normal user talking. People who say font size, I'd be very wary of these people. But when they talk, they do sometimes, give you information, especially when they talk about decision-making criteria on products, for example. That can be very valuable to inform the copy that you should write. But for other things, I'm actually not a huge fan of the unmoderated stuff. That might just be me.
How about you, Justine? What don't you like to use and why?
One of the things not mentioned that it's not that I don't like to use it, but I think sometimes, it's going back to what's the appropriate approach. And I'm certainly a fan of doing things in a lab setting, and there's a time and a place for doing things in a lab setting, but sometimes you really need to get into the natural environment of the participant. And so in those cases, thinking about ways to be on site with them, ethnography in home, ways that you can actually have them experience a product, in their home or somewhere or wherever they would use it. Because then you're getting natural behavior. So I would say not so much as a not like, but making sure you're thinking about how useful the information is going to be on the back end, given the approach that you're using. And so that's one of the things that I would consider as well.
That's a good point. So those aren't things you necessarily want to avoid, but those are other alternatives if you really need to go deep, and having them come into a lab setting may not give you everything you need.
Right, exactly. And it depends on the purpose. I mean, there could just be, if you want to gut check on something, on technology or device, we do lots of that, and that's a great thing. And there's many reasons to bring people into a lab setting and test things, of course. But there's definitely a lot of opportunities where you want to get into their environment and actually see how they're using it in their daily life, because ultimately that's what they're going to be doing. And you want to develop this product or service to the best point that it can get, where the user experience is top notch.
Els, you were saying using the unmoderated for copy considerations. Have you ever thought or actually done using the unmoderated to get language to use for a follow-up interview or moderated study?
I have not, and I forgot to give a shout out to the person that actually convinced me about the value of unmoderated user testing, and that's Joanna Wiebe, who's an awesome copywriter. So I have to give big props to Joanna for supporting me. No, I haven't, Kelly, but now that you're saying this, I might have to give them another go and see whether I can use them that way.
I'm just, thinking about when we were chatting earlier and during your presentation, you, Els, during your presentation talked about the importance of using the right language in your questions. And, the risk of bias and the risk of, all of these other things. I'm just curious, what do you guys do to make sure that your questions are, not leading and, I forgot, you used the terms double-barreled. I mean, that one's pretty, I can figure that out. Am I asking more than one thing in the question, or am I asking a leading question? But what do you do to make sure you're using language so that they understand your questions?
That's a big one. Yeah, because That's really a great question, because I think about that often when I'm putting together surveys or my discussion guide. And a lot of times, as the moderator and as the person designing the survey, I'm the consultant for my client, and I'll say to them, I know that you know what this means, but the average layperson is not going to know what this means. And I make sure that when I get input from them, that I am able to translate it into, user-friendly language, because you shouldn't have to explain your questions in the interview. They should be clear. I would recommend a mock interview. Test it out with another person, a colleague. That's always a great way to see if your questions are clear.
Or somebody not in the industry. Ask your grandma.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, if there's no proprietary or confidentiality thing, that's always one too. So, but that's a great point. If you can do that, absolutely, because I think it's really important to, take it outside of the realm of folks that, they know what they mean. This is the way they speak, and to the end participant, what does it mean to them? So I would highly recommend doing mock interviews, having someone else look at it and just run through it, and take a look and see if it needs to be more clear as well.
Yeah, I agree. There's some basics that you should learn and be aware of, like no double barrel questions, no leading questions where you have only one adjective in the question, like how awesome was this TLT chat today? Yeah, that's terrible. Or loaded questions. What did you think of world-renowned user researcher Justine today? Even though she is, that's no way to ask a question. So you have to keep it neutral, but absolutely good question hygiene, and having somebody else go over your survey, preferably somebody who I always as well, somebody who's of a different age group and of a different gender, because when we say phone, we don't mean talking on the phone. But when I say phone to my mother or my grandmother, especially my grandmother, she interprets phone as having a phone conversation, whereas we might interpret the use of the phone as texting or, checking something in Slack. So is it appropriate to use your phone during Christmas dinner? That would very, very highly depend.
Different meanings, yeah.
Very different meaning. So that's very important. I also, when you're doing user testing or when you're doing remote testing, or if you're doing something like structure testing, try to avoid the word that is on the website. If you set a task, don't use the word that's in the menu. And sometimes it sort of helps if you act stupid. If you start sort of this, you're looking for what's it called again? It does that. I can't believe I can't think of the word. It's like the thing you use to open a bottle, and they go corkscrew, and like, oh, you call it a corkscrew? That's great. You just let them say the word, and then okay, because, and this is a horrible example because I have no synonyms for corkscrew at the ready.
Wine key, bottle opener.
Kelly, you're a dream.
Used to be a waitress.
But see, that. And so then that's what they call that.
Yes.
And you can segue on. Very often, especially in the moderated, don't use the official words of the client, because let your participants basically lead the way, especially in vocabulary as well.
Yeah, I could see that being really important in industries where they are using specific language for specific products. Furniture, I've actually had a client who said, no, we don't call it a couch, we call it a sofa. And I'm like, okay, but what do your customers call it? So yeah, I think that's a really great point. All right, we have 1 minute left. One question that I wanted each of you to answer really quick is just, what one thing would you like the TLCers to take away from this conversation about asking better questions?
My one takeaway would be expect the unexpected, and be okay with that. Be prepared to pivot when you need to. Be really open to learning and the possibility that what the hypothesis or ideas you came in with may not be what you're going to get. So the more open-minded you are, structure your questions well, and be prepared to make changes on the fly if you need to.
Awesome.
That would be my advice.
Els?
That's great advice. I'd like to add on to that. Always remember, why are you asking these questions? What are you trying to find out in the first place? What do you want to do with it? If you don't forget that most important thing, then you'll ask the right questions.
Which is exactly what we say on the quantitative side. What decision are you going to make with this data? It's the same, y'all. We're all the same. Awesome. Thank you, ladies, so much. I really enjoyed the conversation today. I hope everybody else did too. Final reminder about the happy hour live panel at the DA Hub, topic suggestions, and the YouTube channel. The recording will come out today. Thank you, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a great one.
Thanks.